Today you will learn about arrays in JavaScript. As you remember, we can declare a variable, for example ingredient. We used a keyword let for that, but now we are using const to add an additional layer of security. And as you see, in primitive variables, we can store only one object. So for example here, I store a hot paper as our ingredient. But what if we want to store multiple items? For example, ingredients. For this purpose, we have an array. An array is a collection of some items. Like here, you see that we have a variable ingredient, but in our array, we can store multiple ingredients. To create a new array, we must use square brackets, and then inside we can add different primitives. And as you see, I separate them with comma. Arrays have different methods. For example, we have methods to dynamically add and remove items. The first method is push. If you hover over it, you will see the description of what this method does. And as you see, appends new elements to the end of an array. So this is the first part that describes that we have an array, and then with the method push, we can add new items to the end of the list. And this is what we see in the console. So if I log our ingredients to the console, we see 5 elements. And the last element is a caret. The next method is opposite to the push, and this is pop. So if I hover over pop, we see the description that it removes the last element from an array. And as you see, right now in the console we have 4 elements, and we don't see caret that I added one line before. Then we have the unshift method that inserts new element at the start of an array. And what we see is that our new element right now in the first position of our list. And we also have the opposite method shift that removes the first element from an array. You don't have to learn all these methods. If you want to see the list of all methods that you can use, just write the name of our array. In our case, this is ingredients. And then use a dot, and you will see a list of all methods that you can use. And then if you want to know what that method does, just write this name, and you will see a short description of what this method does. Also, if you look at this description, you will really often see the word returns. What this word means? Word returns means the value that you will store in the variable if you will try to store this array with a given method. For example, in this case, if I try to store this array with the method push in the variable, now I will use the word const instead of let, and then I will write variable. And now I also log this variable to the console. And now you see that our variable equals to 5. So we don't store our ingredients, but what we actually store is the new length of the array. All the description that goes after the word returns means what will be stored if we try to save it in some sort of variable. In our case, we can use any name for variable, and we can change it to length or array length. We don't have any changes in the console, but right now this name describes what this variable stores. Let's look at our next method. Pop removes the last element from an array and returns it. So if I try to save this element, I will save the last element of our array. And now you see that this cheese that I pushed in the previous line, if I use the method pop, we don't see cheese in our ingredients, but I can store it into a separate variable that will store this cheese. The third method, unshift, is really similar to push because it also returns the new length of the array. And if we look at shift, it's really similar to pop because it removed the first element from an array and returns the first element. So now if you look to the console, you see that we don't have a mushroom in our ingredients list, but we have this in our variable first element. Now let's talk about indexes. If you look at our array in the console, you will see that the first number is the length of our array. Then you see these elements and you see this small triangle that you can expand. And here you will see more information. So you will see 0 is a bacon, 1 is a cucumber, and 2 is potato. And the last, that length equals to 3. What are these numbers? 0, 1, 2 are indexes of our array. An array in JavaScript are 0 based, and this means that the first element has the index of 0, the second element has the index of 1, and the third element has the index of 2. And why this is helpful is because we can get access to a specific element by index. I wrote ingredients to the console, and now if I use square brackets and then I will put 0, now you see that we have a bacon in the separate line in the console. And notice that we still have this element in our array, but as you see, I can get access to this element using the index. Now you see all these elements accessed by index. If we try to get access to the element with index that doesn't exist in our array, we have undefined as the result. We also can get access to this property free by using ingredients.length. And now you see that I have ingredients 0, 1, 2, and then ingredients.length. And in the console we have 3, which is equal to the length of the array. How to get access to the first and the last elements of an array? As I said, we can get access by indexes. The first element in our array is ingredients with index of 0. And if you think about all other arrays, where the length is more than 0, if our array contains any items, the first element will always be element with the index of 0. But the last element is more complicated, because in our case, the last element has the index of 2. But if we add more elements, and for example, if we have 5 elements, in this case, we can't just use a hard code number, but we can calculate the last index. If you look at our array, the length of our array is 3 and the last index is 2. So it means that to get access to the last element, I can take the length of the array and then subtract 1. Let's use, instead of the hardcode value of 2, this formula. And now, as you see, I still have a potato in our console. Now I added more elements to our array, and you see that the last element is cheese, and this formula still applies, and in the last log we have a cheese. Let's solve a code challenge. Imagine that you have an array that contains some number of elements, and then no matter how many elements your array has, you should write a program that displays each element from an array in the console on a new line. For example, if you have the array items that contains 1, 2, and 3, then the manual way would be to create 3 different console logs and to get access to each element by index. But in this case, if I add or remove some elements from this array, I still need to change my logs. But how to write the program that would automatically display every single element from this array? Try to solve this code challenge by yourself, but right now let's solve it together. We have some sort of array, so we can start from the array of items that contains 1, 2, 3, and then we need to use a loop, and the condition of loop should take into account the amount of elements that our array contains. So I start from the keyword for, and then we need to declare 3 things. So the first block should has some sort of index. So I will write let I equal to 0. The second block is our condition. At this point, I will write some hardcode value, something like I is less than 10. But we will change it later. And the third part should increase our counter. I will write I++. And now our body should log every item to the console. So I will write console.log and then items, and in brackets, instead of the hardcode value, I will use our counter I. And if I save this file, you see that we have 1, 2, 3. We almost achieved our condition, but then we have 7 console logs of undefined. And this is because our condition has a hardcode value of 10. If we add or remove some elements from the array, we will still have 10 console logs in total. What kind of variable should be instead of 10? So let's think how many console logs we need. For this occasion, we need 3 console logs. Why 3? Because we have 3 elements in our array. So the length of this array is 3. Now I have 5 elements in the array. So how many logs we need? We need 5 logs because we have 5 elements in this array. So the length of the array is 5. Let's try to use the length of the array instead of the hardcode value. And now you see that we have as many logs as we need. If I remove some elements, for example, I remove 1 element, our program makes 4 logs. So it automatically updates how many logs we need based on the length of our array. In the next video, we will continue with code challenges to better understand how arrays works and what we can do with them.